we don't, on one hand, but if we do this, then do we take, on one hand, we want to keep this merit piece in perspective, but at the same time, we know that we have to build the evaluation piece right. So to some extent, the merit, which is coming, should be part of these considerations, but at the same time, I don't want to one committee, but if you split into two committees, then it goes joint. So in a natural way, it probably belongs together. Bill, what do you think?
As I said before, I think we would be best served by not taking what resources we have, by putting in our budget a means to improve how we monitor how we monitor teachers. And with that, we already talked about in one of our meetings, ballpark figure of about $250,000 to put people on the ground or in the classrooms to help monitor what's going on. It isn't a business model. You know, I hear this business model a lot. I'm not sure in a business model where one person is responsible for evaluating 65 to 70 people. In law firms, they have a one-on-one mentorship, usually with a senior partner, with a junior partner. Newspaper editors usually have maybe 10 reporters. It's probably too many now, you know, under them at one point in the big city newspapers to do their evaluations. And in corporate America, they'll spend a week sometimes doing an evaluation on just one employee. So if you want to see that student achievement improve, you have a rigorous and robust evaluation instrument with teachers involved in the process. But you also, if you just do that, if you say to the subcommittee, and we have been waiting to see how the direction will come, if you're telling us, you know, we can have that, we can develop that rigorous piece, but it's not going to work without the supervision piece. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what it would look like, but I'm telling you right now, we would need more supervision to make sure we're getting it done. And you know, I'm sure some people don't want to hear that, but you can't expect one person to supervise adequately 90 people or 80 people, even 1 to 25. It's just not reasonable. And if you ratchet that up, then you can bring, you know, you put your supports in for teachers that have trouble making, you know, the standard that we set forward. But if they can't, then you have your documentation to move on those few teachers that aren't doing it. And it's a fair process. Because the other way, the $250,000 we're talking about is just relieving some of our experts, our math teachers, our math department head, our English department head at the high school, so they can be freed up to help go into the classrooms, use that instrument that's been developed, and so on. If you want to go merit pay as a committee later on, you have an instrument, but that instrument needs to evaluate more than just test scores. And it needs to take into many different facets of the process. And in order to measure it appropriately and fairly, I believe Mrs. Parker talked about how, you know, how does someone from outside their area measure them. I always said that as a principal. You know, so I relied on my department heads. When I went into a world Spanish class, a Spanish 4 class, I relied on my department head. Yeah, I know certain things that I can look for, but it's my department head who's the expert. And you need these experts of teachers, you know, and it would be a change for some of them, because we would need their evaluations to mean something, because right now department head, they do their evaluations, but they're not part of the tenure process. So there would be a change in the paradigm for the teachers as well, you know, to make this all work. But my position is that, yes, we can develop that document, and it will be very robust, and I think it will meet what was set forth by the strategic plan oversight committee, but it will not be effective if you can't implement it properly. Regardless, money aside, bonuses aside, if you don't have that component, you can have the best plan on the planet be brought here and implemented, but without the appropriate means to carry it out, it's not going to be as effective as it should be. In Hillsborough County, and I'm just going to fall back to them, It's a $250 million project. Part of their plan is to hire 200 teachers they're not, many of them will come from the teaching ranks, but they'll be in the central office to help assist principals in that assessment process. So you can't have all this achievement without the assessment piece, which we talked about. We talked about this 2 months ago, minus the merit pay discussion. And it's still, in my mind, the same problem. We need a better evaluation system for our teachers that gives a good measure of what they're doing in the classroom, both in and outside, but it also, and it allows for the support for those teachers, but we've got to have the support, otherwise it just won't be as effective. And I don't care whether you're offering $20,000 a year for improved test scores or not. If you can't measure it, you look at these models, they all talk about evaluation, they talk about working with the principals, they admit that you can't do it properly just by, what if you have a high school of 100 staff? How's one person going to be responsible for that? It just doesn't make sense. So,
see, sometimes a simplistic view that, okay, we can look up the scores. This just takes a second. And then I will look at a table, how does this translate to what kind of bonus you're supposed to get, and magic appears. We know the result. So I obviously understand that this is going to be meaningful, that then this evaluation piece has to be trivial, and non-trivial things don't cost zero, or it's going to be pretty expensive to actually implement this. And I know we don't have enough resources as we stand right now to do it right, but
we can develop the instrument.
Yep.
That's the easy part.
And once we have an instrument with our current level of funding, how many times a year do you estimate teachers could be evaluated? Because
realistically,
with the manpower you have,
if you have 65 teachers, more or less, certified staff at the high school, one principal, the vice principal needs to be online if the principal comes off. So maybe 2 or 3 times a year if you have no non-tenured, so that you could get that many in. That's optimistic.
All of them, or just
no,
tenured?
to do everybody.
Everybody.
Without, just in general, realistically, with everything that's required at the high school and middle school especially, you're looking at maybe 3 times a year. Right now, the current staff.
The teacher advancement program, which was started by the Milken Family Foundation, they have 4 to 6 teacher evaluations a year, and they're done by multiple evaluators. Mrs. Parker spoke to that. When you only have one person evaluating you, that person cannot be an expert on all the subject areas. And then you have the cost of training the evaluators to use your system. So, what kind of administration costs are we talking about to implement that kind of evaluation?
Well, you're talking about taking the people offline, first of all, the current staff, using people such as, your math department head, ELA, and science. Just say that for the sake of discussion, because that's what we test on. I would recommend you do the same at the middle school. Or you take the high school people offline entirely, so they supervise both the high school and middle school in those content areas. Either way, it's about $250,000 that we talked about. That's just to get the people on the ground. Your training would be subject to what you're trying to implement. What are you trying to do with that evaluation instrument? So then you get them on the ground, you get them up and trained, and then you would be able to really target areas that you want to see improved on. But right now, we don't have that capability. We simply don't. Now, I don't know many districts that do. Others have better support systems. For example, in middle schools, they have grade leaders that go into the classrooms, do evaluations in addition to the principals. There are ELA coordinators and math coordinators at your middle schools in a lot of districts. But this is a cost just to follow that model, or to follow that thought process. That's $250,000 above where we are right now.
With no bonus.
With no bonus money. That's correct.